Hey everybody, it's Original Ren. Thanks so much for stopping by my YouTube channel. I'm really glad to see you and I hope you're all doing fantastic today. In today's video we're going to be having a book discussion. And the book in question is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, a Russian writer. I wanted to make this video because in a recent recording of mine where I did a Lolicon tribute, I mentioned this book and a lot of people were messaging me saying that they were interested in finding out a little bit more about it. And I thought, what better way to do that than to make a video dedicated specifically to discussing the book and allowing me to ask you open questions to hear your opinion about the matter. I'll try to keep my opinions to a minimum in this video. Mostly I want to keep this an open-ended discussion, open question discussion, where a lot of you can answer your own questions. Feel free to comment in the comment section and discuss it. I'll also be posting this on a website where people can discuss it freely and openly there via forums. And I just want to kind of open the discussion to a lot of people. And I know this is a topic that a lot of people tend to avoid, not really that comfortable talking with, so we'll try to keep it on the down low, try to keep it nice and simple and not too difficult for a lot of you so we can get through it and make it a fun discussion today, okay? So what I want to do starting out is let's talk a little bit about Lolita, the book, and how it relates specifically to otaku culture. And before we get into that, let's actually just give a summary of the history of the book. Lolita, a book by Vladimir Nabokov, as I said earlier, a Russian writer, was originally published in 1955 in Paris in English as its original language to begin with. In 1958, it had moved to being published in New York, and in 1959 it was finally published in London. Years later, it finally got written in Vladimir's original language of Russian, and then we saw the actual book being made. Lolita is in the top 100 books of all time, and it is a great read. I highly recommend it. Very challenging for non-native English speakers. I oftentimes compare it to Moby Dick, where I actually think Moby Dick's a little bit easier to read. The romantic language used in Lolita is quite difficult sometimes, and if you can speak French, Spanish, Italian, or any other romance language that exists, or variants of them, you may be able to understand some of the larger vernacular that's used in the actual read, but I highly recommend native English speakers read it. I highly recommend, if you're really confident in your English skills, to read the book as well. It's kind of written in more of a prose, I would say, and has that romantic language a lot in its vocabulary. But as I said, this was originally a book published in Paris in 1955, and like I said, top 100 book and became a huge success. And the book's contents are oftentimes left up for discussion because of what the actual, well, story entails. And for those of you who are unaware, Lolita is a book about a man, who we'll get into the details of all the characters in a little bit here, who falls in love with a 12-year-old girl by the name of Lolita, or so he calls her. And she has an actual name, and we'll get into all that in a second as well. And in the book, it's oftentimes regarded as being, well, controversial because it's about a grown man, I think he's in his late 30s, falling in love with a 12-year-old. And oftentimes, you know, even in age of consent, anywhere in the world, 12 is, I think, younger than most age of consents in the world. I believe the youngest is Japan, and it might be 14 years old. I'm not actually sure the age of consents of every country. There might be younger ages than I am unaware of. But for the most part, this is something that, being that it was written in the English language to begin with and was in Europe and the age of consent was not that low, it sparked a lot of discussion. However, it is still considered a highly great book, and one of the biggest controversies and biggest things about discussion of the book is, what was the purpose of it? Was it meant to relay a message? Was it meant to be a comedic relief? Because honestly, the book is very entertaining and very comedic if you can understand some of the jokes. But what was actually the purpose of the book? And that's what we're going to be discussing here today when I go into it a little more, and I want to hear your thoughts about it as well. So first, let's summarize the book for those of you who haven't read it. Now, if you care about spoilers, this book really isn't meant to be a spoiler book. It doesn't really have a plot to it necessarily. So if you don't like to be spoiled and you want to read the book by yourself, I highly recommend not really watching this video. It might not be for you, but if you are interested about it, you don't plan on picking up Nabokov's book and reading some 500+ page book anytime in the near future with, you know, challenging English prose, then go ahead and read this. Go ahead and watch this video, I apologize. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the book and exactly what it all entails. So we have a couple characters in this story, and our main protagonist, we'll call him, is a gentleman by the name of Humbert, and I believe he's in his age, late 30s in his age. And this man Humbert is a very noble gentleman, and he used to have a lovely girl when he was younger who he had fallen in love with, and they were lovers. Well, by mean lovers, they were dating at a younger age as kids. And there was this girl by the name of Annabelle Lee. And Annabelle Lee had died, and I forgot the actual cause, and pardon me if I forget a little bit of the details of the story. It's mostly just a summary from what I remember. And this girl, Annabelle Lee, had died, and he was very grief-stricken because of this. And as he grew older, he decided that he would do a lot of jobs to help him earn money, and he was doing a lot of things to kind of get by in the world, but he wasn't really falling in love with anybody, and he kind of realized this. And eventually, one day, he met a family by the name of the Maccoos, M-C-C-O-O-S, the Maccoos. And this family had taken him in as, I believe it was a caretaker or something he was doing with the family, and he met this woman by the name of Catherine. And Catherine was an older woman, not necessarily, I think he was around the age of Humbert, maybe probably younger a little bit, in her 20s, maybe early 30s. And this Catherine woman had a daughter. She was a widow, I believe, and she had a daughter by the name of Dolores. And Dolores was a young 12-year-old girl who was very sweet, very kind girl, kind of dressed in a lot of like dresses and things like that, which I think may have sparked sort of the style of Lolita, but the actual Gothic style that you're maybe used to. But that's not really what the detail of this video is about. And this girl, Dolores, going back on track here with the story, this girl of Dolores is somebody that captured the eye of Humbert, and Humbert, who had seen this old lover of his named Annabelle Lee, this is why this was important, had seen Annabelle Lee as Dolores. And he nicknamed Dolores Lolita because it was just his nickname he used for her when he was legitimately sexually attracted to her at a young age, and was falling in love with her due to her cuteness and kindness. Now, Catherine, in turn, the mother of Dolores, had fallen in love with Humbert and had said that, in order to stay in the house so as to not be awkward, I love you, I would love to marry you. And obviously marriage back then was a little bit different. I believe this setting was in Europe at the time. It might have been in and around London. I actually forgot the exact setting. If somebody wants to verify that for me, please do. So essentially speaking, this girl Catherine said, we need to get married. And Humbert, being the man that he was, did not love her, obviously. He loved Dolores, and decided to marry Catherine so he could remain close to Dolores at all times. So they got married, and eventually what happened was Catherine had started finding out about this love affair, this love interest in her 12-year-old daughter. And Catherine started calling him out on it and saying that he was a terrible human being. And eventually she was going to report this to somebody. I don't remember if it was the cops, and it ended up resulting in a fatal car accident where she ran out into the street because of an argument and actually got hit by a car and was killed. And so with Catherine out of the picture, Humbert was left to take care of Dolores, because I think the rest of the Maccoo family was really old. They didn't really have the time to take care of kids anymore. Maybe they were dead. I actually forgot the other people in the story, but I do remember he ended up taking care of this girl, Dolores. And as the story goes on, it develops where he starts asking Dolores to do sexual favors for him. Detailed sexual favors that appear in the story. And it's interesting because throughout the story there's a sense of comedic value to it. It's funny, there's comedy in it, revolving around these sexual favors and him and the time he spent with Dolores. But at the same time there's serious matters too. And Humbert believed, in his quotes, that he was protecting this young, innocent child. And he was there to keep her safe, to make her feel like she was important, that she would never be harmed. And I'll step into more detail about that a little later when we get into the otaku end of things. And eventually, as the story progresses, I forgot exactly what happens, but he moves on from Dolores. Dolores gets old enough, and she ends up going to, school and stuff. And she turns 17, and our story kicks off again as a time leap, I believe, where she ends up calling Humbert, who she still knew at the time, and she had said that she was pregnant, and she had married a man named Quincy. And she married this gentleman and got pregnant and said she was in desperate need of money, and she was basically working at a whorehouse, or in the porn business, because this was around, the book was written in 1955. I think the year was around that time too, so things were pretty, decently modern, it was more modern than like the 18th century kind of love affairs. And he ended up going out to Dolores and giving her a lot of money and told her to leave Quincy. And of course Dolores refused. She says, no, I'm in love with this Quincy gentleman, and I don't want to leave him. And eventually, to summarize the story, Humbert ended up murdering Quincy and getting pulled over for drunk driving and going to prison and dying of some disease that he had gotten. I think it was a type of leukemia, can't quite remember, while he was in prison. Dolores, at the same time, had given birth to her child, had died in childbirth, and gave birth to an actual stillborn. So, in the end of the story, or at the end of the story, everyone died. And it was kind of a dark ending to the book. And so, with that being said, and with the whole summary of the story, I kind of want to just talk a little bit about what that entailed. Now, one of the biggest questions and the controversies about this book, as I mentioned, and this is now getting a little bit into my opinions, but open into questions for you about the summary. When you read the book, which I highly recommend you do, you realize that there's comedy to it, but there's also dark sides to it. And at the end of the story, all the characters end up dying in some way or another. This was supposed to be a journal of Humbert, is what we're reading, the book Lolita. And it ends up being a very dark story. And one of the most interesting things that strikes me as odd is how this story ended up being so praised, so highly regarded, especially with the sexual favors and all the different, what we would consider taboo in culture today, at least in where I live from America. Even somewhat taboo in Japan, which will relate to the otaku culture and lolis and lolicons later. And one of the questions I have for you as viewers who are viewing this video is, hearing that summary of the story, what do you think the reason is that a lot of people praise this book? Was it the excellent writing? Was it just the overall touching on a subject that people weren't comfortable with, allowing them to view the evil in this world? Which we'll get into that in the next part here. What was the meaning of the book? What do you think Vladimir Nabokov was trying to write when he was doing this book? Was it meant to be comedic? Was it meant to be serious? Was it meant to, give us a representation of evil in this world? One of the opinions I have about the book is that Humbert is supposed to be someone that we do not want to connect with. Everything that Humbert does ends up bad around him. He's almost like a walking devil, almost. Everything he does, his actions, his choices, while he thinks he's doing things for the right cause, he's not. And was this the purpose that Vladimir was trying to get across with his book? Are we trying to say that Humbert is the evil in this world? That the Humberts out there are the bad guys, the ones who believe they're protecting young innocent children, but in reality are actually scarring them for life? Is this the kind of evil that will happen to every girl that's been, sexually involved with somebody much older than them at a young age before hitting puberty? And this is the kind of question that a lot of people have. And it strikes me as interesting because switching gears, when we get into the actual aspects of the otaku culture, we get into the word loli. And now, I believe that loli was pulled from the book Lolita. I believe that a Japanese individual had read Lolita, had liked the word, and decided to use it as a term to define young children. Japan likes to borrow a lot of things from the West. They think it's cool. That's why they have a lot of English phrases and a lot of things they write. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's really a deep meaning behind it, as if like they're trying to relate to Lolita. But I think they just borrowed the word because it related to what they were trying to talk about, and they thought it was a cool book, or they just thought it overall was a cool word. So that being said, we get sort of into the term loli. And that was the reason why it kind of came to be. So, an interesting thing is that in the book, Lolita, which we're now going to be switching gears into Loli being developed into Lolicon. But before we get into that, the question I have for you is, what does it mean to be a loli? In the book, Humbert describes his obsession with young children as nymphets, is the term he uses. And nymphets, according to him, are anywhere ages 9 to 14, usually before puberty. Although females do hit puberty much faster than males do, usually around age 12 to 13 is when they're starting to hit that, but it could be late bloomers. So usually 9 to 14 is what he described as these nymphets. And that being said, we look at the term loli today. And I ask myself, is a loli somebody that is based on age? Is a loli somebody that's based on looks? Or is a loli somebody based on if they've hit puberty or not? And this is a wide open discussion in the otaku culture, and I want to know your thoughts and opinions on it. And I'll kind of go into my thoughts and opinions, but I really don't have an opinion about it because I'm not an expert when it comes to these kinds of things. I mean, if you take, for example, some of the figures I'm showing here today, I specifically brought out Nymph because a lot of people consider Nymph from Sorono Toshimono to be a loli. And if you look at this figure specifically, which I'll bring it a little more into the camera, not too much, you can obviously see that her body necessarily isn't that of a 10-year-old. In the actual show, it looks more like a maybe 15-year-old, somebody that's younger, but could just be somebody that's extremely old that just has an underdeveloped body. And this is the big question. If it doesn't have to do with age, what kind of body type does it need to be? I mean, Nymph has a chest. She's not flat-chested in the show. She has quite a very large ass, based on one of the figurines I own of her, and also from the show. And most people would say that, you know, lolis at that young age, if you're a young child, you don't really have that kind of development yet. You don't have the hips to be able to allow yourself from puberty, the hips to have the kind of body structure that a lot of characters do. And I think Nymph is an example, and this big figure I used because it was just larger, is an example of, people would call Nymph a loli, but I mean, she has a body type that's clearly not similar to, say, for example, Tomoka from Ryokubu. And her body type's much different. Now, she specifically also has a larger ass, but is flat-chested. And these are two completely different looking characters. I mean, if you look at some of the official artwork for Tomoka versus Nymph, you see very large differences. And while both of them could technically, I guess, be considered lolis, how do we determine what an actual loli is? And some of my friends I've spoken to, for example, have said that a loli can be any age. Age has nothing to do with it. It has to do strictly with the body structure. If you have breasts, you are not considered a loli. Some people don't consider that opai loli, or a thing that's real. And for those of you who are just watching this video, opai is slang term for breasts. So it's lolis that have very large breasts. Perfect example of this would be this poster right up here. This would be an example of what most people would consider an opai loli. Now, a lot of people don't think or consider that that's existent, but it is something that does exist in Japanese culture. So I almost find it odd and strange that some people would say, no, I don't believe that that's in existence, even though Japan draws it and it exists. Are we as Westerners, or the people that take these ideas from Japanese otaku culture, do we have the right to change our definition of what a loli is? Or do we have to go by Japan standards because it's what they've developed? And when we talk about loli, we always talk about two-dimensional animation from Japan. I suppose you can use it to discuss everything in life, but honestly, you're not going to use the term loli in real life. You would use just a child. One thing that, you know, kind of, and we'll get into Lolicon here and what it means, but for example, you look at Maria Naruse. Maria Naruse has a loli form and a non-loli form. I mean, obviously she looks like a young child, but she has an ass. She looks like a kid, but I think one of the interesting things that I've always found about lolis in Japan is they're extremely over-sexualized. And this is the big question. To be considered a lolicon, to be considered a loli, does it have to be something that has a sexual connotation to it? That's something that's over-sexualized? We see Nymph scantily clad. We see Tomoka scantily clad. Our Yuki Nikan here. Our Takanashi Miu. Our Naruse Maria. I mean, they're all kind of scantily clad, and it's all different. You know, I have my Dakimakura here of Row 500, who clearly, in my opinion, is a loli. But you can obviously tell, like, her body structure is much different than Nymph's. So all of these would be considered lolis, at least to the people I've spoken to. But there seems such inconsistency between all the characters that how can we, you know, what defines this term? And this gets into the big discussion of the term lolicon and what people define themselves as lolicons. Now, I've always had a problem with this term because, my personal opinion, I believe that being a lolicon means you are sexually attracted to characters such as this, that are younger in age. Being sexually attracted to, for example, Nymph versus being sexually attracted to Row 500, I think there's a huge difference, in my personal opinion. Some people might say, no, that doesn't matter. You're still considered a lolicon because they're both considered lolis. I've heard people say that you can be 40 years old, have a body like this, and still be considered a loli. Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, when it comes to Japan, you can just say anybody's any age and then get away with anything, because it is a cartoon. But why is it then that, for example, people praise Nabokov's book? A book that is supposed to reflect us hating somebody, the Humberts of the world, the people that say they're here to protect innocent creatures when they're human beings. Why is it that people praise that book, but people immediately shun, immediately hate, or consider people that are into young children in a cartoon disgusting and wrong? I mean, it seems almost hypocritical to me. And I'm not trying to justify anything. Maybe I'm incorrect about that. I really just want to more open the question up to you, or what your thoughts are. It seems very strange to me that people will praise Nabokov's work, consider it to be a masterpiece, but then also get angry at the people that talk about how they like lolly characters from a cartoon. And I could see the argument for saying it doesn't harm anybody, but then you got to get into the book of Lolita, the Humberts of this world, the ones that are saying they're protecting innocent creatures. When you think about it, Lolita is just an open-ended book. It's just a fictional book. It's not real. These characters in these stories are fictional characters. They're not real. Yet, we relate to and hate the Humberts of this world. So it finds, on the flip side of that, I talked about how I think it's kind of stupid, or strange to me. Not stupid necessarily. I think it's strange that people will praise Nabokov's book, but also get angry at Lolicon's in Japanese 2D animation. On the flip side, as I was just saying, Lolicons try to justify their behavior by saying they're just protecting these people and being, innocent creatures when they're sexually attracted to them. Well, that's the same kind of character that I hated in Nabokov's Lolita book, right? You're the Humberts of this world, the Humberts that people don't like. And I think, as I mentioned in a previous video, that one of the reasons that a lot of people are not comfortable with Lolicons to begin with is their general attitude, their creepiness. They're very introverted. They like to keep to themselves. It's almost as if they themselves feel ashamed of this sexual attraction. And so they try to hide it and don't want to tell other people about it. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's the same, and I completely understand that. But why is it, there's so many different fetishes out there. There's people who live, as a buddy of mine who's in the artist community, the furry fetish, and all sorts of different things. And, everybody has different tastes. Everybody has different opinions. Why are some viewed as more negatively than others? And, originally I always thought that, these people were all scum of the earth. And I've started to open my mind, and while I may not agree with them necessarily, I've started to open my mind a little more, after reading that book, and it really has opened my mind as to the idea behind being a Lolicon, people who consider themselves one, and also just the negativity that surrounds it. And so getting back a little on track here, one of the big things I also want to talk again about Lolicons is it sexual or is it non-sexual? Can you be a Lolicon because you like a character, or do you have to be sexually attracted to them? For example, if I like Naruse Maria and I think she's hot, most people would immediately say, well, Ren, I see that you're a Lolicon. Okay, fair enough. But now let's say something else. I watch Spirited Away, the film. Kiki's Delivery Service. Love those movies. They're fantastic. I think Kiki's a cool character. I like her. She's a great protagonist. She's a young child. Does that make me a Lolicon because I like a young character? Some people might say yes. Some people might say no. If you say no, what makes it a difference that if I like, for example, Tomoka from Ryokubu versus Kiki's Delivery Service? And this is where I think that sexuality comes into play. This show is meant to sexually stimulate in some ways. This outfit, this figure itself, is meant to be a sexual stimulant. Takanashi Miu, with the fact that she's looking a little seductive, not necessarily sexual, but you have panty shots that you can look up these characters. Yuki Mikan has a very detailed ass, is adjusting her swimsuit. Naruse Maria, don't really need to say much about that one, and don't really need to say much about Nymph. Dakimakros. Now, does this Row 500 look that sexual? No. On the back side of this, there's some very not safe for work stuff, which I won't be showing you. But I think a lot of the times the term Lolicon really has to do with sexuality. Japan, in my personal opinion, over-sexualizes a lot of lolly characters, especially ones like these. If Tomoka would be 11 to 12 years old, do you think she'd have an ass like that? Probably not. Do you think she'd have hips like that? Probably not. Do you think she'd look like she has an adult body almost, just flat-chested? Probably not. If you look at a child in real life, they don't have this kind of development. Now, obviously, Japan is fake, or sorry, anime is fake in a way that, people don't have that large of chests to begin with. their bodies would be destroyed if they even had body structures like that. I mean, ignoring the full details of the fact that it is a cartoon, I think a lot of people get into the hobby or feel like they are sexually attracted to something because of the fact that the characters are over-sexualized. And that's where I kind of think that if a character is sexualized, or you are sexually attracted to a character, that would make you a lolicon, with that term of being lolicon. But are you a lolicon, my apologies, are you a lolicon because you like a character such as Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, or the main protagonist from Spirited Away? You tell me. I don't really have an answer for that. I want to hear your opinions. So, we've talked a lot about lolis, lolicons, and what it all entails. And one of the biggest things I've kind of changed my opinion about, and I want to hear your thoughts as well, is, well, honestly, I just think everybody should read Lolita. It's a fantastic book. It really opens up a lot of thought to it. And I always thought that this was a hobby that I needed to avoid, that I couldn't get this, but then I started to realize that I like Naruse Maria because of her character, not because of her body type. I like Nymph because she's a cool character, not because of her body type. By the way, I've never actually seen this anime, Shin Mai Mouno Testament, so you can clearly tell that I'm great. The figure looked nice. I wanted to buy it, so I bought it. Now, I'm not going to lie. You look at a character like Naruse Maria, and she has a very detailed ass. Well, what does that mean? She has a detailed ass. Okay. Do you think that somebody who's a nymphet, according to Humbert, is going to have that kind of detailed ass? No, absolutely not. So there's a lot of open-ended questions we kind of leave on the table here, you know? People praise Lolita's book. Why do people shun lolicons? It's because they're creepy? Is it because they're introverts? They keep to themselves? And they have that kind of Humbert attitude that we're all supposed to hate? The protecting innocent creatures attitude? I mean, that's the kind of people, you know, the bad stuff happens around them. Again, what was the purpose of Nabokov's book? Was it to open up people's opinions, you know, about this subject being a taboo subject? Was it meant to be comedic? The story's hilarious, by the way. There's great moments in it. Well, what did it actually entail? At the end, Dolores dies. She completely has a terrible life. She ends up in the porn industry, unwillingly, scrapping for food, trying to beg for money. 17, pregnant, dies in childbirth and has a stillborn. I mean, it's a terrible and tragic ending. But do we blame her or do we blame Humbert? Is Humbert the one that's ruined everyone's life? Catherine dies. He ends up dying. He kills a gentleman. Dolores dies. All of it collapsed around him because he wanted to be with this one person. Are we trying to get the message from Nabokov that being in love with young children will ruin everyone's lives around you? Not only yours, not only the lives of the person, the young girl, but the lives around her and your life as well. Maybe this was, maybe this was the message that Nabokov was trying to deliver. It's an interesting take on the book. And then, how does that relate to the otaku culture? Is it wrong that people like these lolly characters from a cartoon when it is just fiction? Maybe you aren't like the Humberts. Maybe you just are attracted to anything that's anime. In a previous video of mine, I mentioned, you know, a lot of people think that there's hot anime waifus, I guess you could call them. And, well, okay, you have a lot of hot anime waifus, but what makes you any better being attracted to a cartoon than the people that are attracted to a cartoon of younger characters? I mean, it's an interesting thing, and I have no real opinion about it. I mean, I've stated some of my opinions of what I think. My opinions are more what I think the message is trying to say. You know, I kind of weighed both sides, and I have personal opinions. You know, it's opened my mind a lot more, but I'm more interested in what you have to say. What do you think the purpose of Nabokov's book was? What do you think? Why do you think Lolicon has a bad connotation to it? Do you think it's wrong to be one? Do you think it's, after hearing this video, or possibly if you ever read Lolita in the future, that it's a bad thing? If you're not that Humbert? Does you, if you are a Humbert, do you feel like you're ruining people's lives around you? You know? What do you guys think? I'll open this discussion up to a lot of you. I really want to know your opinions, and I hope this video was really informative, that you really liked it. I tried to make it cool and interesting, and I hope it was really awesome. So, thanks guys for joining me for this video, and I hope it was fun, exciting, and you learned something a little bit. And feel free to participate in the section. Sorry, feel free to participate in the discussion as well. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Okay, so thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video. This has been Original Ren, and as always, bye-bye, guys. Hey guys, so just to add a little bonus section on this video, I want to discuss some of the things I mentioned here today, specifically all the figurines you see before you, this Dakimakura cover, and then also that poster up there. So this poster was printed by a company named Kind. They were kind enough to actually print it for me, including all the other posters you see in this video right now. This one specifically was medium in size. It was probably around $25 for a high glossy luster photo print. So something that, if you're interested in getting any posters, that'd be something you may be able to do via Kind. These figurines right here, this is Takanashi Miu from Papa Kikinasai, and she is around 9,000 yen currently when I purchased her, but I'm sure you can find her for cheaper or possibly more expensive depending on how rare she is now. Over here we have Tomoka from Yokubu. She's the most expensive and the most popular out of all the bunny versions of them, and she probably runs for around 15,000 yen, much more on the heavy end of price range. A lot of times you have to find her because she's no longer in print, purchase from another person, or usually on eBay or another website. AmiAmi usually doesn't have those ones up. Here's Yuki Mikan, another very expensive one, usually around 12,000 yen. Yuki Mikan has an interchangeable face. It is the alter version, swimsuit version of her. I highly recommend it. Great figure if you're interested in purchasing that. Naruse Maria went for around 9,000 yen as well, possibly 8,800 yen if I'm not mistaken. She's from Vertex. There's also another character for Yuki coming out in the near future. Hasn't not been painted yet. Also, Mio is already out if you're interested in Shinmai Mano Testament. And finally, this 1/4 nymph. The 1/4 nymph in Japan runs for around 13,000. Because I wasn't currently in Japan, I ended up paying around 15,000 for her. But you can find her for different prices. That's all in yen, by the way. This one was new, so she's a 1/4 scale from Freeing. Freeing is very good at their 1/4 scales. I'm sure you've seen some bunny versions. I also have the Icaros version of this one. Didn't get the Astria, didn't really like it as much, but ended up getting the nymph. So that's another figure for you. And last but not least, we have this Dakimakura from Konko. This was purchased at Comic at 89. It is no longer for sale. I did see one by a gentleman on eBay recently for $900. At Japan, in Akiba Zone, one of my friends had told me that it was currently running for 38,000 yen. Sorry, 38,800 yen. So around $388 on an even exchange. This is a very expensive pillow. I ended up only paying, I think it was 10,000? Yeah, 10,000 yen when a buddy of mine bought it at Comiket, 89, which was last winter in December. So I ended up purchasing this one. There is a not safe for work image on the back with some nudity on it, so I will not be showing that, unfortunately, for the camera. But it is a 160 centimeter by 50 centimeter. I ended up stuffing it myself. And it's one of those stretchy covers, so when you actually pull on it, it has like a stretchable fabric. It's not the two-way tricot that you purchase from a lot of Cospa Dakimakuros if you are interested. You can't really find this one anymore unless you pay a crap ton of money for it, so that is row 500. Alright guys, I hope that was really helpful. I hope you guys liked the video, like I said, and thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!